I'm Elizabeth, 42, a project manager in Denver, Colorado, and that Christmas I thought I was ready to reconnect with my family. I was wrong. After a brutal day wrestling deadlines at work, I drove to my mom's house carrying a tray of homemade cookies, hoping for a warm evening. But when I walked in, my mom looked at me, smirked, and said, flat out, "There's no room for you here." My brother nodded, standing there while the room buzzed with guests, people I didn't even know, laughing and clinking glasses. I froze, feeling like I'd been slapped, but I didn't say a word. I just smiled, set a small, neatly wrapped box on the table and whispered, "Open it tomorrow." They couldn't wait. The second I turned to leave, I heard the wrapping paper tear, followed by my mom's scream echoing through the house. What was in that box? A gift they never saw coming, and that was just the start. If you've ever walked away in silence instead of begging to stay, you'll understand this story. Hit follow to see what lesson the box I left behind taught them. Growing up in our small Denver suburb, I was always the odd one out. My mom called me weird for spending hours with my nose in books, while my brother was the golden boy tossing footballs and charming everyone at family gatherings. By high school, I was pulling straight A's, stacking up scholarships. But to my family, I was just too serious. My mom would roll her eyes when I talked about college plans, saying, "Why can't you be normal, like your brother?" He'd laugh, throwing in jabs about my nerdy dreams of working in tech. I'd bite my tongue, hoping one day they'd see me for who I was. When I landed my first job as a project manager at 25, I thought things might shift. I was pulling in a solid salary, building a life in Denver, but the gap only widened. My mom started calling with requests, not small ones. First, it was $3,000 to cover her car payments after she forgot to budget. I wired the money, thinking it might earn me a shred of respect. It didn't. Then came the utility bills, always paired with a story about how she was struggling. I paid those too, dipping into my savings while she hosted lavish barbecues for neighbors I barely knew. My brother was worse. He'd call all charm, asking for loans to fund his latest get-rich-quick scheme, a food truck one month, a drop-shipping business the next. I sent him $5,000 once, then another $2,000, but the money vanished and he never mentioned it again. I kept giving, telling myself it was for family, hoping they'd finally see me as more than a resource. The biggest sacrifice came 5 years ago when I was 37 and my daughter was 12. My mom had her heart set on a plot of land in the Colorado mountains, a half-acre perfect for a vacation cabin. She called it a family retreat, a place where we could all come together. I was skeptical. Her track record wasn't great, but my daughter deserved memories with her grandma, and I wanted to believe we could be a real family. So I bought the land, $30,000, every cent from my savings. I insisted on keeping it in my name, just in case, but I let my mom use it. She built a small cabin, nothing luxurious, but it became her obsession. She'd host weekend getaways, inviting my brother, his friends, even distant cousins. I'd get a text, maybe saying, "It's too crowded this time, Beth." Too crowded. For the person who paid for it. I'd drive up, sometimes hoping to join, but there was always an excuse. Once I showed up unannounced with my daughter, thinking we'd surprise them. My mom barely looked up from her card game, muttering, "You should have called." My brother smirked, saying, "This isn't really your scene, is it?" I swallowed the hurt, drove back to Denver, and told my daughter we'd make our own memories. But it stung. Every check I sent, every bill I paid, chipped away at me. My mom would brag about the cabin to her friends, calling it her dream, never mentioning who made it possible. My brother would post photos online, grinning in front of the cabin while I was left out of the frame. Looking back, I see how naive I was. I kept giving, thinking it would earn me a place in their lives. I paid their phone bills, their groceries, even my mom's credit card debt, $10,000 over the years. But respect, that was never on the table. They didn't see me as their daughter or sister. I was their safety net, their bank account, nothing more. And they never once said, "Thank you." But that Christmas Eve, I walked into my mom's house in Denver with a flicker of hope. I'd been up since dawn, wrestling a project deadline at work, my inbox flooded with urgent emails. Still, I'd carved out time to bake a tray of gingerbread cookies, my daughter's favorite, thinking maybe this time we'd have a real family night. My daughter was with me, her jacket slung over the couch as we stepped into the living room. The place was packed, laughter bouncing off the walls, string lights blinking, and a table piled high with food, roast turkey, mashed potatoes, the works. I scanned the room, expecting at least a nod, a smile. Instead, my mom caught my eye, her lips curling into that familiar smirk. "There's no room for you here, Beth," she said, her voice loud enough to cut through the chatter. "We've got important people tonight, Daniel's colleagues, real movers and shakers." I froze, the tray of cookies heavy in my hands. My brother Daniel was leaning against the counter, a beer in hand, his grin sharp as a blade. "Yeah, Beth, it's kind of a VIP thing," he added, drawing out the words like he was savoring them. The guests, strangers mostly in pressed shirts and flashy watches, turned to stare. Some chuckled, others whispered, their eyes flicking between me and the empty plates on the table. One woman, her glass of wine tilted, muttered, "Who brings cookies to a dinner like this?" The laughter that followed hit like a punch. I felt my face burn, not just from embarrassment but from the weight of years of being pushed aside. My mom, Margaret, didn't even blink, just turned back to her conversation, dismissing me like I was a stranger who'd wandered in off the street. I set the cookies on a side table, my hands steady despite the knot in my chest, and forced a tight smile. "Got it," I said, my voice low but clear. I turned to leave, my daughter trailing behind her steps, quick and quiet. I could feel her tension like a taut wire between us. Outside, the Denver air was sharp, biting at my skin as I slid into the driver's seat. My daughter Chloe climbed in beside me, her hands twisting in her lap. She was quiet for a moment, then her voice came low and sharp. "Mom, I saw how they looked at you. Grandma didn't even try to make space. She laughed when you walked away like it was some big joke. And Uncle Daniel, he was egging her on, smirking like he'd won something." I gripped the steering wheel, staring at the dashboard, the city lights reflecting off the windshield. Chloe's words cut deeper than Margaret's. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my daughter, 17 years old, seeing her mom humiliated in front of a room full of strangers. I tried to brush it off, saying, "It's just how they are, Chloe." But she shook her head, her voice rising. "No, Mom, it's not okay. You do everything for them. You paid for Grandma's cabin, her bills, her whole lifestyle, and they treat you like you're nothing. I saw her roll her eyes when you walked in like you were some kind of nuisance. And Daniel, he just stood there acting like he's better than you. I hate it." Her voice cracked, and I saw her eyes glisten in the dim light. I reached for her hand, squeezing it, but my mind was racing. She was right. I'd spent years telling myself I could handle their dismissals, that I was doing it for family, for Chloe. But standing there, tray in hand, hearing Margaret's voice carry across the room, seeing Daniel's smug nod, it hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just another slight. It was a public declaration that I didn't belong, that my sacrifices meant nothing. And worse, my daughter had to witness it, her faith in her family crumbling right there in that crowded room. As we drove home, the city lights blurring past, I kept replaying the scene. Margaret's smirk sharp and deliberate like she'd practiced it. Daniel's taunt VIP thing dripping with condescension. The guests' laughter casual but cruel, like I was the punchline to a joke I'd never heard. It wasn't just a moment. It was a lifetime of being pushed out, of being told I didn't fit. I thought about all the times I'd bitten my tongue, smiled through their jabs, paid their bills to keep the peace. But what kind of peace was this? What kind of family laughs at you in front of strangers, makes your kid feel like her mom's worthless? Chloe broke the silence again, her voice steadier now. "Mom, you don't deserve that. Nobody does. They act like they're above you. But they're the ones living off your money. It's not fair." I nodded, my jaw tight, her words sinking in. She wasn't just hurt, she was angry for me, for us. And that anger lit something in me. I'd always told myself I was doing this for Chloe, to give her a family, a connection. But what kind of connection was this A family that didn't save a seat for us, that mocked us to impress people who didn't even know our names? By the time we pulled into our driveway, the weight of that night had settled in my bones. I looked at Chloe. Her face set her eyes fierce with the kind of loyalty I'd always given but never gotten. "You're right," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "This isn't okay." And as we sat there, the cold seeping through the car windows, I knew I couldn't let this slide. By the time we reached our Denver apartment, well past midnight, sleep was out of the question. My head churned with Margaret's sharp smirk, Daniel's mocking VIP thing, and the stranger's laughter that chased us out the door. I'd spent years telling myself I could take their dismissals, but this wasn't just about me anymore. Chloe had felt the sting too. I needed someone to cut through the haze, someone who'd tell it straight. So on Christmas morning, I called Rachel, my colleague and closest friend. I met Rachel at a downtown coffee shop, its windows glowing with holiday lights, the air buzzing with shoppers grabbing last-minute gifts. She was already there, sipping a latte, her curly hair pulled back. "Beth, you look like you haven't slept in days," she said, setting her cup down as I slid into the booth. I didn't bother with pleasantries. I spilled everything Margaret's loud. "There's no room for you here," cutting through the party. Daniel's smug jab about it being a VIP thing. Chloe's voice cracking as she described watching her mom humiliated. Rachel's jaw tightened, her fingers drumming on the table. When I finished, she leaned forward, her voice low but fierce. "Beth, this isn't just rude, it's cruel. They've been using you for years, taking your money, your sacrifices, and they repay you with this. They don't deserve you." Her words cracked open a truth I'd buried under years of excuses. I'd always thought family meant enduring the mess, giving endlessly because that's what daughters do. But Rachel wasn't having it. "You bought that land for Margaret's cabin, didn't you?" she asked, her eyes sharp. I nodded, my throat tight. "And her bills, Daniel's loans, you've poured thousands into them. What do you get? Nothing but contempt. You're not their bank, Beth. You're their daughter, their sister. Why are you letting them walk all over you?" She paused, then hit me with the question that shifted everything. "What's stopping you from taking it all back?" I stared at my coffee, the steam fading, and something clicked. Taking it back. The land, the cabin, the years of being their safety net, it was mine to reclaim. 5 years ago, I'd spent $30,000 of my savings on that half-acre in the Colorado mountains, keeping it in my name for a reason. Margaret treated it like her personal estate, hosting her parties, while Daniel lounged there with his buddies, never once acknowledging me. The bills I'd paid, phone, groceries, Margaret's credit card debt, added up to tens of thousands. Daniel's loans for his failed ventures, never repaid, were another hit. Rachel's words lit a fire. They didn't deserve any of it. Not the land. Not my money. Not me. I went home, my resolve hardening with every step. Chloe was in her room, headphones on, practicing for a school play. I didn't want to drag her into this. Not yet. I caught her eye through the open door, and she gave me a curious look. "You okay, Mom?" she asked. I nodded, my voice steady. "I'm fixing this," I said. She smiled, a spark of pride in her eyes, and went back to her script. That was enough to keep me going. I sat at the kitchen table, pulling up the deed to the mountain land. The numbers stared back, $30,000 paid in full, my name alone. I thought about Margaret's cabin, her pride and joy built with my money, but never shared with me. I thought about Daniel smirking at her parties, never thanking me. My hands were steady as I dialed my lawyer, Sarah, a no-nonsense woman I'd worked with on a contract dispute years ago. "I want to sell the land," I told her, my voice firm. "The cabin, everything." Sarah didn't ask for reasons. "Your name's on the deed, so it's straightforward," she said. "We'll need a transfer document to assert control, then we can list it. I know a buyer looking for mountain property." By noon, she emailed me a draft, a formal notice of intent to transfer and sell the land, every word crisp and binding. I read it, my heart pounding with clarity. This was my line in the sand. But I wanted more than a legal move. I wanted Margaret and Daniel to feel the weight of what they'd done to face it in front of family. So I printed the document, folded it neatly, and tucked it into a small gift box wrapped in shiny red paper with a gold ribbon Christmas style to make it sting. I wrote a note short and sharp. For you, Mom. Open it after I'm gone. That evening, I drove to Margaret's house alone, my pulse racing. The lights were on, but it wasn't the chaotic buzz of the Christmas Eve party. Inside, it was just family Margaret, Daniel, and my Aunt Patricia sitting around the dining table with plates of leftover turkey and pie, probably exchanging late Christmas gifts or catching up. Their laughter drifted out, the kind I'd never been part of. I walked in, the gift box in my hand, and the room went quiet. Margaret looked up, her lips pursing. "Beth, what are you doing here?" she asked, her tone clipped like I was an uninvited guest. Daniel leaned back in his chair, a smirk spreading. "Back for more. Thought you'd had enough last night," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Patricia, stirring a mug of cocoa, gave me a soft smile, trying to ease the tension. "Good to see you, Beth," she said, but I didn't respond. The air was thick, their mockery hanging like a weight. I stepped forward, my voice steady, and set the box on the table in front of Margaret. "A Christmas gift," I said, locking eyes with her. "Open it after I'm gone." Daniel snorted, rolling his eyes. "What's this, another peace offering?" he muttered. Margaret's fingers hovered over the box, her expression skeptical. I didn't wait for more. I turned and walked out, the door clicking shut behind me. As I reached my car, I heard the rustle of paper, then Margaret's voice, sharp and defiant. "I'm not waiting for her." The wrapping tore, and a second later her scream ripped through the house, raw, furious, unmistakable. Daniel's shout followed, but I didn't look back. I slid into the driver's seat, my phone buzzing with a text from Rachel. "Did you do it?" I typed back. "It's done." For the first time in years, I felt free, not just from their expectations, but from the weight of trying to be enough. The next morning, my phone was a storm of notifications, missed calls from Margaret, Daniel, and even my dad John, their voicemails piling up like unpaid bills. I ignored them, my resolve still burning from the night before. I wasn't ready for their excuses, not after years of being their afterthought. But around noon, a knock at my apartment door in Denver stopped me cold. I opened it to find Margaret, Daniel, and my dad standing there, their faces a mix of anger and desperation. I hadn't expected them to come to me. My apartment, a small 2-bedroom, I'd worked hard to make a home for Chloe, and me felt suddenly too small for this. Margaret stood in the doorway, her coat buttoned tight, her eyes red and blazing. Daniel loomed behind her, his jaw set, hands shoved in his pockets. My dad John looked out of place, his shoulders hunched, his usual calm replaced by a quiet unease. Chloe was at a friend's house rehearsing for her school play, and I was glad she didn't have to see this. I stepped aside, letting them in, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "What do you want?" Margaret didn't sit. She marched into my living room, clutching the crumpled deed transfer, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Beth, what is this garbage?" She thrust the paper toward me, her hand trembling with rage. "You think you can take my cabin away? My home. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me." Her words were an attack. Her face twisted with indignation, as if I'd stolen something sacred. I stood by the couch, my arms crossed, unflinching. "It's not your home, Margaret. It's mine. I paid for it, $30,000 of my savings. Every single cent." Daniel stepped forward, his voice loud and accusing, filling the room. "You're pulling this now, after all we've been through as a family." He pointed at me, his face flushed with anger. "You owe us, Beth. You've got the big job, the money. You think you're better than us, but you're nothing without this family. I need that land for a deal. My investors are expecting it. If you sell it, I'm done for, and you're going to fix this." His words were the same old script, entitlement wrapped in blame. He'd taken thousands from me over the years for his ventures. A food truck that went bust, a tech idea that never left the ground, never repaying a dime, always with a new sob story. I met his glare, my voice calm, but razor sharp. I don't owe you anything, Daniel. Not anymore. I've paid for Mom's bills, your loans, that land, years of it. And what do I get? You laughing in my face, telling me there's no room for me at your table. You humiliated me in front of strangers, made Chloe watch her mom be treated like nothing. My heart pounded, but I didn't waver. I turned to my dad, hoping for something, anything to show he saw me. But he stood by the window, his hands clasped, his eyes fixed on the floor, silent as ever. Margaret slammed the deed transfer onto my coffee table, the sound echoing in the small room. You ungrateful child. She spat, her eyes burning with fury. After all we've done, raising you, giving you a family, you pull this stunt. That cabin is my legacy and you're tearing it away out of spite. Her words were venom, but they slid off me. I saw her for what she was. Someone who'd taken my sacrifices for granted, who'd built her world on my money without a hint of gratitude. I stepped closer, my voice low and steady. Your legacy, I paid for it, Margaret. I paid for your phone, your groceries, your credit card debt, tens of thousands over the years. I paid for Daniel's failed schemes, his so-called investors. And what did I get? You telling me I don't belong, mocking me in front of your guests. You made my daughter feel like her mom's worthless. That's not family. That's not love. I paused, letting the truth settle. I'm done being your bank. Daniel lunged forward, his face inches from mine, his voice shaking with rage. You think you can just walk away? I need that land, Beth. My investors will sue me if this deal falls through. You're going to keep helping us, or I'll drag you through court. Make sure everyone knows what a selfish I cut him off, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. Go ahead, Daniel. Try it. The deed's in my name. My lawyer's already moving forward with the sale. You're not getting another cent from me. I turned to Margaret, her face pale, her lips quivering with suppressed rage. And you, Mom, you can keep your legacy, but it won't be built on my back anymore. My dad finally spoke, his voice soft but heavy, each word like a stone. Beth, we're family. This isn't how families handle things. Can't we work this out? You don't have to sell the land. His plea hit harder than Margaret's anger or Daniel's threats. He'd never mocked me, never asked for money, but he'd also never defended me, never stopped them from treating me like an outsider. I looked at him, my chest tight with a mix of love and hurt. Dad, I wanted a family. I tried for years, paying, giving, hoping you'd see me, but all I got was a room full of people who don't. I can't keep doing this. Daniel threw his hands up, scoffing. You're so dramatic, Beth. Playing the victim, fine. But you're not getting away with this. I'll fight you in court, whatever it takes. You can't just cut us off? His threat was hollow, and he knew it. I held his gaze, unyielding. Good luck with that, Daniel. The paperwork's done. The buyer's lined up. You're out of moves. Margaret's eyes darted between us, her usual sharpness fading into something brittle, but she didn't speak. My dad's shoulders slumped further, his silence louder than any words. The room was still, the weight of my stand pressing down on all of us. I didn't wait for them to respond. I walked to the door, holding it open, my voice firm. You can leave now. Daniel stormed out first, muttering under his breath, followed by Margaret, her head high, but her eyes avoiding mine. My dad lingered, his hand brushing the doorframe, but he didn't look back. The door closed behind them, the sound final. I sat on my couch, staring at the coffee table where Margaret had slammed the deed transfer, and felt a strange calm. This wasn't just about the land. It was about reclaiming my life for me and Chloe. By the first week of January, I was back in touch with my lawyer, Sarah. She'd found a buyer for the half-acre in the Colorado mountains, a developer eager to turn it into a rental property. The cabin Margaret's so-called legacy was included in the deal. I didn't hesitate. Finalize it, I told Sarah, my voice steady over the phone. The paperwork moved fast, and by mid-January the sale was complete. $35,000 hit my account, a small profit over what I'd paid 5 years ago. I didn't feel triumphant, just relieved. That land had been a chain tying me to a family that never saw me. Now it was gone. I didn't hear from Margaret or Daniel directly after they left my apartment, but Sarah warned me they might try something. Sure enough, in early February, I got a letter from a lawyer I didn't recognize. Daniel had followed through on his threat, filing a claim to block the sale, arguing the cabin was family property. Margaret's name was on it too, her signature scrawled next to his. The claim was flimsy. My name was the only one on the deed, and Sarah had every document to prove it. "They don't have a case," she told me, her tone matter of fact. "This is just noise." She was right. By late February, a judge dismissed their claim in a single hearing. The land was mine to sell, and it was already sold. I learned through a mutual acquaintance that Margaret and Daniel were forced to move out of the cabin within weeks of the sale. Without it, they had no choice but to downsize. Margaret, who'd always prided herself on her mountain retreat, rented a one-bedroom apartment in a rundown Denver complex, her savings too thin to afford anything better. Daniel, with his investors long gone, moved in with her, scraping by on odd jobs. My dad John stayed with them, his pension barely covering their bills. I didn't feel sorry for them. They'd built their lives on my money, my sacrifices, and now they were facing the reality of living without it. Chloe and I made a decision that same February: no more contact. I'd spent years chasing a family that didn't want me, and I wasn't going to let Chloe grow up thinking that's what love looked like. We blocked their numbers, Margaret's, Daniel's, even my dad's. It wasn't easy. My dad's quiet plea from that day in my apartment lingered, his sad eyes flashing in my mind. But I couldn't keep opening the door to people who only hurt us. Chloe agreed, her voice firm, when we talked about it over dinner one night. "They don't deserve you, Mom," she said, her fork pausing mid-air. "We're better off." At 17, she saw it clearer than I had for years. With the money from the sale, I paid off the last of my credit card debt, a lingering weight from years of covering Margaret's bills. The rest went into a savings account for Chloe's college fund. She was applying to schools, her eyes bright with plans for theater programs. I started saying yes to things I'd put off for years: weekend hikes with Rachel, a pottery class I'd always wanted to try, even a solo trip to the coast that spring. For the first time, I wasn't living for anyone else's approval. My apartment, once a place I'd barely noticed, became a real home. Chloe and I painted the walls a soft blue, hung photos from her school plays, and filled the shelves with books we actually wanted to read. I didn't check on Margaret, or Daniel didn't ask around about them. The acquaintance who'd mentioned their move stopped bringing them up, and I was grateful. But one day in March, a letter arrived, forwarded from Sarah's office. It was from my dad, handwritten, the ink smudged in places. He didn't ask for money or mention the cabin. He just wrote, "I'm sorry I didn't see you, Beth. I hope you're happy." I read it once, then tucked it into a drawer. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I was done carrying their weight. I wished him well in my own way, but I wasn't going back. By summer, Chloe and I were in a new rhythm. She landed a lead role in her school's spring play, and I was there in the front row, cheering louder than anyone. Rachel came too, her laughter filling the auditorium. My life wasn't perfect. There were still late nights at work, still bills to pay, but it was mine. I wasn't the daughter who paid for everything, the sister who fixed everyone's messes. I was just Beth, and that was enough. Looking back, that Christmas when Margaret said there was no room for me changed everything. It wasn't just about losing a seat at their table. It was about finding my own. Chloe and I built something better, something real. We didn't need their approval, their cabin, or their version of family. We had each other, and that was more than enough. The Christmas lights twinkled in our Denver apartment, casting a warm glow over the small tree Chloe and I had decorated together. It was December 2024, a year since the night I walked away from a family that never made room for me. This Christmas was ours, just the two of us, and it felt right. Chloe, now 18, was humming a holiday tune, setting out plates of homemade cookies and hot cocoa on our little kitchen table. The air smelled of pine and sugar, and for the first time in years I felt at home, not just in this space, but in my own skin. We'd spent the day wrapped in blankets, watching old holiday movies and laughing over Chloe's attempts to bake gingerbread. She'd gotten flour on her nose, and I couldn't stop smiling as she recounted her latest theater rehearsal, her hands waving dramatically. This was our family now, small but real. No crowded parties, no sharp words, just us. I'd bought her a new script book for her college auditions, and she'd gifted me a mug with World's Okayest Mom painted on it, her teasing grin lighting up the room. We didn't need a big celebration. We had each other, and that was more than enough. Looking back, I realized how much had changed. I used to think family meant giving everything, my money, my time, my heart, even when it left me empty. I'd poured so much into people who never saw my worth, believing that was my role. But their selfishness cost them everything: the cabin, their pride, their place in my life. I learned a hard lesson: taking without giving back leaves you with nothing but loss. Cherish the people who lift you up, the ones who show up for you, because they're the ones who matter. Chloe and I built something new this year, something ours. We didn't need a seat at anyone else's table. We made our own, filled with love, laughter, and the kind of warmth I'd spent years chasing. To everyone who's followed this story to the end, thank you. Your time, your support, it means the world. If this resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and join us for more stories about finding your strength and building your own path. Here's to new beginnings, to tables where there's always room for you. Gia Jean Nho. Bai Hok Su Ihki, Dan Jen Mat Mat Lon. He Tran Trong, Nung Nguai, Jen Giup, Jo Ban. Kam On Nhung Kan Gia, Juon Getoi Kwai, Chung Tao Shuyen Tran Trong Ho. Ve Keu Goi, Jang Ki.